Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a new product announcement video for more 1/16 scale Heng Long M1 Abrams tank parts. All of the components mentioned in this video are brand new additions to the East Coast Armory 1/16 scale product line, and all of these components can be found via the link listed below in the video description. There you will find not just these components, but all the other 1/16 scale detail components that are offered by ECA. In this video, we're not just going to be showing the new detail parts, but we're also going to be showing how they fit to the model, what changes can be made to the model in order to get the parts to fit on better, as well as what the final outcome looks like once these new parts are fitted in place. So stay tuned because there's going to be a bunch of new info coming right at you. The last time I made a product announcement video for the Heng Long Abrams, it was with the grill work in the back. Well, in addition to the grill work area, something else that always was, in my opinion, one of the weaker aspects on the Heng Long M1 Abrams was with the rear plate that we have here. So on the rear plate, we have these fastener location holes, which are used to secure the equipment on the inside of the vehicle. This would be for securing on the smoke system, and these two here are the actual fasteners that secure the top deck to the lower hull, specifically on the back section. On the front section, it is a similar type situation where we have these two holes over here. However, I could talk about that at a later date. On this portion of the Abrams, you also have these two access hatches on either side of the hull, and I believe these are to get access to the transmission or the brakes. It's one or the other. Regardless, the detailing found on the Heng Long are in the typical format, where we just have the flat plate over here with the large fastener holes, and then we have two basic molded in details of those axis panels. However, if you look at a real M1 Abrams, the detailing is a bit more elaborate compared to the ones that you see here. And also, obviously, you don't have these giant gaping holes that are found in the rear plate. In an effort to improve the model, I went ahead and developed the set that we have here. This here is the Heng Long M1 Abrams lower rear hull detail set. Basically, what this gives you are the following components. You have a few permanent magnets that we have right here. You have a 3D printed, or I should say a nylon 3D printed panel. And we also have two HD 3D printed hatch details. The way that this set is intended to work is that those fasteners that are used to secure the upper and lower hulls together, those are going to be removed, and you're going to replace those with a set of these magnets. There's 4 total, 2 that go on the lower hull, and the other 2 go on the upper hull. Once the magnets are fit in place, the magnets will click together, and this will act as a securement point as opposed to using the fasteners. The necessity for replacing the bolts with magnets is one that's important because obviously once this set goes on, you're not going to be able to get access to those locations anymore with the original fasteners. The idea of this set is that you're basically plating over the fastener locations that are found on the model. You can try plugging them up with putty and epoxy and sanding them down with bodywork, and although that will work, that is something that is viable, it's just easier to just plate it over entirely, and then you have now the proper recesses for the actual detail hatches that we have right here. As for these components, as I touched upon before, they are made from HD 3D print, and these are more accurate in detailing compared to the ones found on the molded on Heng Long counterpart. These pieces have the appropriate shape, they have the fastener details, and they also have these weird block details that are present on the external sections. The units are designed to drop directly into place once this rear plate here is fitted in place. To fit the plate in place, there's actually a couple ways to do it. On the back portion here, we have these 2 pegs, which can be used to drill 2 holes or corresponding holes into the rear plate, and then the unit can just index in, or you could simply just delete them altogether and just glue the piece directly to the plastic. Either way will get you basically to the same end result, and it just depends on how comfortable the builder is with certain procedures. To get the alignment just right for those pegs, one trick that I like to utilize on my builds is when I take a little drop of paint, I add to each of the protrusion points. Then I just carefully line it up on the model, touch the surface, and then when I take it off, I know exactly where I should have a good approximation of where the holes need to be drilled. From here I could drill out the 2 holes, and then the piece can drop directly in place. One thing that I do want to mention is that I can see that this hole over here is a little too close to comfort to this other fastener point, so on the production ones I'm going to move it probably a little bit more towards this end just so that it has less area over here for it to be interfered with. But for this pre-production one here, I'm going to go ahead and keep the format that I have. So to drill these out, this is just simply done with a Dremel bit. Drill out those two sections, and then that's all that's required really for the prep work on that section. The next thing I need to do is the prep work for these two hatches. These stick above the surface, and it would be best if they were amputated outright, just so it's a nice smooth surface for everything to fit on in their appropriate manner. Briefly, before I go ahead and remove these two sections over here, the two holes have been added with the Dremel, and I could take the new plate and just plate it directly over the current kit version. And even with those other access plates in place, you can see that it fits directly over it without any sort of problems. And you can see that this here requires a lot less work to fit compared to trying to blend in and do all the body work on those other sections. To remove the molded in sections, like I mentioned before, there are a few different ways to do it. You can use a file, you can use an X-Acto. I'm just going to go ahead and use the Dremel here with a high-speed removal bit. This will make the shortest work of removing of these sections. After the Dremel does its work, just a few passes here with a bit of sandpaper, just to make sure that the surface is nice and smooth, is all that is required. It also helps scuff the surface up, which will aid with the adhesives once it comes time to permanently mount that plate in place. There we go, that does the trick just fine. Drop this bad boy back where it needs to go. And it's already beginning to take shape. One quick procedure I am going to do before I fit on the plate is with the fastener here for the smoke system. I'm going to take some super glue and I'm just going to put a nice little tub of it around the fastener itself. This is just to act as a sort of Loctite and will prevent the screw from getting loose over time. With the plate installed, you're not going to get access to that screw anymore, so it would behoove you to go ahead and take care of that at this time. And on that topic, this leads us back to the inside. As I touched upon before, these two fasteners over here are used to secure the top deck onto the model via fasteners. And with the plate added in place, you're not going to be able to use fasteners for that application anymore. Well, you can, but you're not going to be able to take the top deck off. So, obviously, because the model is radio controlled, having the top deck being something that is a part that can be taken on and off, this needs to have some kind of change made. And the change that was made was with the magnets I touched upon before. Here you get to see those two permanent magnets fitted in place. These small magnets over here fit in that little hole that's found for the fastener absolutely perfectly. You just stuff them in, add some glue, and you're good to go. On the reverse side, you add magnets to where the fasteners, again, would have originally been mounted. These two small fasteners here will click into place when everything is properly indexed. And once they are in place, should do an adequate job of keeping the top deck, or I should say the rear section of the top deck, where it needs to be. There are several other fasteners that are found on the model, so these ones here aren't that important. So the small magnets there should be adequate for the job at hand. Basically, on this particular build, the four that are in the middle over here, those are going to do the main work in holding the top deck in place. The two on the front, I also swapped out with magnets at this time. However, I'm going to be doing something with that, and that's probably something I'm going to be touching upon in the next upcoming new ECA parts announcement video. So back to the installation of this component. I'm just going to go ahead and add some super glue to the cover plate. You want to add a decent amount of glue here because obviously this area is quite often struck with foreign objects and material. And count the tank is radio controlled, of course. So you do want to use a good amount of glue on this section. And then once the glue is applied, you just simply drop it in to where it needs to go. The piece is designed to be a direct drop-in part for the Heng Long M1 Abrams. So if anyone's watching this and they're wondering if it'll work on the Tamiya or the trumpeter version, I have no guarantees about that, because this was specifically intended for use on the Heng Long pattern of tank like I have here. With this now in place, it's time to switch over to the axis panels, which are right over here. One thing you'll notice that the axis panels are made out of a resin 3D print as opposed to the nylon print that's used for the plate. This was because for the plate, the standard material works just fine, but for the axis panels, I really wanted to have as much detail fidelity as possible, and that's why I went with this material. To remove it off the sprue, all you gotta do is just snip it off. Right there. There are some columns molded in. You could potentially use those as indexing points, but for these ones here, I think the sunken well should be more than adequate for the task at hand. I'm just going to go ahead and file down any remnants of the stem that are left. This is to ensure that the bottom portion here is completely flat from any sort of protrusions, because, well, it needs to sit as flat as possible here on the model, and any sort of protrusions can be a bit problematic. Okay, so once the stem has been filed away, it's now time to install them to the model. To install the plates, they just drop directly into their location, as you see. No fuss, no muss, no other hand fitting required, just drop and go. One thing I do want to mention is that you want to make sure that the orientation is proper on these parts here. They do go on in one certain direction, and you can easily put them on upside down or inverted, neither of which is ideal. There are lots of photographs out there on the bottom portion here of the real M1. They can be easily found with a Google search. In fact, I'll even throw a link to one in the video description so you get to see the orientation on the real one to use as a reference in case you pick up this set over here. So to install, just add some super glue in the little recess, and then just drop it in, and that's it. You're all set. The piece here has now been completely mounted. For extra added detailing, you can sculpt some weld beads into these locations over here. However, this is something that's best up to the discretion of the builder. The next bit of detailing involves this section that we have over here. Like I touched upon in the last product announcement video, there is a telephone communication box equipment that's generally found on this section on many M1s out there, both US Marine Corps and US Army. Not to mention the ones that went to the other foreign contracts, but that's really out of the scope of this video. In order to flesh this detailing out, I went ahead and developed the components to add over here. And well, let me go ahead and readjust the camera so you get to see exactly what these new components are. And here's the ECA 3D printed M1 Abrams telephone communication box set right here. This set is only one of about 3 that are offered on the ECA website, and you can see thumbnails of the other versions on the screen right now. One version in particular is that is generally used on US Marine Corps tanks, while the other versions are generally seen on US Army versions. The one that we have here is the version that has the small box along with the larger box. And this component is basically all, again, HD 3D printed, as are the other telephone comm boxes that are found on the ECA catalog. The sets are fully detailed with the latch details, the latch clasp, the hinge detailing, even the breather valve right over here. And yes, the valve does have its little hose clamp detailing integrally printed on. On the top portion here, we have the mount for the conduit, which would come out this section and plug into the taillight, which was something I referenced in the last product announcement video. Also found on the sets are other bits of detailing which are required to be added to the rear grille area of the M1 that are absent on the stock Heng Long version. This would include these 2 mounting brackets, as well as these U-shackle points. For the U-shackle points, there are more included than were necessary, and are then again there just to be used as spares in case, a mishap were to happen, either during construction or after the model is completed. It's always good to have spares. On the comm box setup itself, you'll see that it's on a shelf, which is exactly how it is on the real unit, and has its standoffs, as again is what we would see on the actual counterpart found on the vehicle. And as it turns out, while I had that other component that was in dry time waiting for the piece to be mounted to the model, the UPS man showed up with a package from the printer, and here I have 2 production examples of the actual box. This one here is the exact same pattern that I touched upon before, and it's one being used on the current build that I'm utilizing. However, this one here is a production unit that's going to be shortly boxed up and shipped to the customer. This here is the other pattern that I was referencing earlier. Note this one does not have the top box present. Instead, it has that other little conduit guard that is found on this version of this unit. In addition to that, you can also see the little bit of wire that's included. This is just so that you could have the actual wire cabling detailing, which is something that will greatly improve the look of the build, but this is something that's going to be added, of course, or it should be added at the very tail end of the build, since you don't want to get this overpainted with the base coat. So here's the rear section with the communication box fitted in place. Also, I went ahead and primed it in flat black, so you get a good idea exactly the type of detailing that is found on the piece, but it's a bit easier now with the coat of paint on the surface. As I touched upon before, it has all of the mentioned details, as well as also the weld beads, which would be important for this type of bit of equipment. In addition to the telephone comm box fitted in place, the next thing I want to mention are with the other parts that are supplied on the set, which go on the top portion here of the exhaust grill, and you can see what they look like now fitted in place. We have those two hooks, which are like a square stock that's bent into a loop section. Of course, the weld beads are present on that. And we also have these like mounting brackets that we have right here, and you can see the fastener detail as well as that oval slit mounting detailing, which will be present on the real units as well. It is a mirror image on the opposite side with the same type of details I just mentioned. Another new product announcement to mention involves the upper hull. Currently, the upper hull segment that you see on the table is stock Heng Long, and what you see is exactly what you get when you buy one of these models from any of the various vendors that are out there on the internet. The detailing found on the component here is actually pretty decent. It has, by and large, most of the details that would be present on the real M1's top section. The quality of the moldings are, again, adequate. However, there are some ways to further enhance this section, elevating it from the position that we have here and giving the model that much more extra added detail and accuracy. Some of the areas that I want to mention involve the side sections here of the side skirts. Here you can see what the standard side skirt panels look like. What you see is basically, what you get. Everything is nicely rendered with hinges as well as the cut points on replicating, or I should say simulating, the side skirts in their segmented form, which is exactly as per the real one. In the back portion over here, we have this cutout, which is actually for the fire extinguisher. This is something that's present on basically all American tanks in one location or another. And the fire extinguisher is just this little cave over here with a little slot that is integrally molded in to give you the look and feel of the fire extinguisher handle. On the opposite side here, we have a storage bin, much along the lines that you would see on a Pershing or a M60 or an M48. It's kind of where they got the idea from. And we have the bin lid with the X crimpings as well as the hinges and also the little latches, again, just integrally molded on. And that's basically all there is to it. However, well, let's just go ahead and cut across to the new detail accessory set that I just designed, which is going to be enhancing all of the features that or I should say all of the kit sections that I just mentioned. And here on the table are the new EastCoastArmory.com HD 3D printed M1 Abrams top hull detail set. What these sets here contain are these two runners, and on these runners are components that are either completely left omitted on the Heng Long M1 Abrams tooling, or are there but are in a very soft and basic manner. As for what the sets give you, well, let's go ahead and bring the camera in closer so you really get to appreciate what type of detailing is present on these components. Okay, so, like I stated before, these consist of these two sprues. We have a left sprue and a right sprue. Note, everything is labeled appropriately, and this is by design because there's going to be a lot of stuff on here that you are going to have to carefully index appropriately on the model in order to thoroughly flesh it out. Starting with the most numerous bits of component are these strips here with all these fasteners on them. These strips are found on the real M1 Abrams and are positioned on the top portion of the side skirt panels. If you look at a real M1 Abrams, the side skirt panels are not smooth like they are on the model, like I have right over here. Instead, we have these strips that have several fasteners on them that are, I believe, holding the thing together in one way, shape, or form or another. Regardless of the actual function, they are found on the real vehicle, but are absent on the Heng Long counterpart. Well, this set over here supplies you with all of the appropriate strips, with the appropriate number of fasteners on it, I might add, for each side of the model. To the casual observer, you may see a ton of little strips here and a little bit confused on their actual layout. However, there is a method to the madness that I will touch upon momentarily. I do want to say that the set here gives you enough strips for not just one, but two Heng Long M1 Abrams models. The reason why I decided to double these sections up, well, it's always good, again, to have spares. Either you might run into a mishap or an accident during the actual construction, or, you know, something could fall on the model and break something. Weirder stuff has happened in the past, and so it's always good, again, to have spares, and so you have enough components on here for two tanks. Play your cards right, you could outfit two vehicles. The other thing that is present on the set here is with this little box that we have here. As I touched upon before, the M1 Abrams does have a fire extinguisher located on the rear quarter section of the one side. Well, that bit of detailing is present on the model, but as we saw before, it's a bit shallow molded and basic detailed at best. Well, this set here is designed to give you the other detailing. As you can see, this is now a fully three-dimensional detail component where we have depth. We also have the weld beads found on the inside, which is something I saw on a real example that I was studying. And also, you get to see the intricate detailing that is found on the fire extinguisher handle itself. This is true with the stem, the hex-type fasteners that are found on all the fittings. All that detailing is present on this component here. As you can see, it is a single 3D printing, which means that it's a drop-in insert, and installing it to the model is going to be fairly straightforward. I will be touching upon the installation on this momentarily. From the fire extinguisher takes us to this other very uniquely shaped bit of equipment, and this is something that actually had a bit of fun designing. If anyone is curious what this is, well, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure some M1 guy out there will definitely chime in here, but I believe this is actually the bilge pump. And the reason why I say that is because on the M60A1, there is this exact type of equipment that is found on the front section near the driver's hatch, and has this distinctive tube with this rubber breather type section that is hose clamped in place. The M1 Abrams has the exact same fitting found right in front of the storage locker that I touched upon before. The unit is very closely studied from a real example, and you get to see the distinctive oval plate here with the weld beads that are present. The tube is also welded into that section, and then we have the breather valve, complete with the shape of the breather valve. Note it has that little slit right there in the center portion, so you can spit water out. It's a one-way type valve. And then you can even see the detailing found on the hose clamp. Again, a single integral 3D printing. The next sprue contains more of these strips that I touched upon before, but you also see some other components, namely these little latches. These latches here are for the bin, the storage bin lid that I talked about just a few moments ago. The unit has them integrally molded on. However, the handles themselves are just like the handles found on the previous legacy vehicles, i.e. the M60, the M48, and you can even go all the way back to the M26 Pershing. On the ECA set here, you get to see the shape of the latch. In addition to the latch, we also have the hatch or locking system right over there, which is a little tab that's welded to the lid, and then it'll allow you to secure a padlock in place. The unit is a single 3D printing, which means installation is going to be very simply done. You just delete the molded in sections found on the model, and you just drop the new one in place. Just like with many of the other components, this here is a duplicate set, so in case there's any sort of mishaps whatsoever, you have an emergency set ready to go. So circling back to the strips themselves, like I stated before, there is a method to the madness, and to understand what I'm referring to, let me bring the hull back over here, and you will see that I went ahead and labeled, or I should say numbered, all of the side skirt panels. From 1 all the way through to 14. This is relevant to point out because on the runners over here, not only do I have the left and right hand specific sections labeled, but you will also see numbers that are integrally printed on. There's a 12, 11, 8, and on the opposite side you can see some more, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. The reason why this is relevant is because the strips are specific to each of the side skirt panels. And in order to properly index everything, you have to go ahead and number everything like the way I did over here. So the unit on the left-hand side is panel number 1, and then you go ahead and you mark them accordingly. Same with the opposite side. On the 3D printed set, this is why I also labeled everything as left and right, and I even went ahead and labeled the orientation of the vehicle. So you can see right there is the front. And same thing with this fella right over here. So you have the left and right hand specific. And this will help key up which strips go to which exact locations. I am going to go ahead and show the installation of these components in this video, so you get an idea exactly how to flesh everything out. But before I do that, I do want to go ahead and add the fire extinguisher right over here, because this is going to require me to go in here with some tools, and you don't want to damage any of those strips before this section here is drilled out. So let's go ahead and put a pin on the strips for the time being and take care of that fire extinguisher. The first thing you need to do to install the fire extinguisher is you got to carve out the molded-in one that we have right here. In order to do that, I'm going to utilize these small micro router bits, and here's the vendor, as well as the actual size of the bit that I'm using. The vendor, by the way, has the link in the video description below. So I go ahead, I'm going to be using a Dremel for this. Make sure the bit is on there in a nice secure manner, and then I'm just going to go ahead and delete the material. For this, you want to be very careful. You want to avoid going anywhere near the top or the bottom portion, as you don't want to hog out really any material over there. You just want to carve out enough area in order for you to install a needle file, which will go ahead and precisely remove just the right amount of material that is required. And as you can see, the router does real short work of the material in question. And this is why I recommend using this size of a router bit, by the way. They do have larger size router bits, but they may be a little bit too large and you can potentially have some collateral damage. So play it safe and get the smaller ones like I have done over here. And you can see how precise I was able to hog out that material. Like I touched on before, in order to clean out this hole further, I'm going to utilize a needle file for this. And this is something you can pick up from Amazon.com like I did for this one. Or you can pick up a set like this from Harbor Freight. These things are basically everywhere. And they're really good to have in your modeling toolbox. And if you don't have a set, I strongly recommend getting one. It'll make building models a bit more easily done. So after a few swipes with the flat needle file, a round needle file, and a square needle file, I was able to go ahead and carefully work within the line, so to speak, and remove the necessary material. Now, from here you have two options. You can actually just glue the unit directly to the back here and call it a day. However, for me, I'm going to do a little bit more extra material removal, because on the inside here, you can see that there is a blister integrally molded on. The blister, I feel like, should be deleted, so you have a nice flat surface. Will make installing the piece a little bit more easily done. However, like I touched upon before, if you do not have the type of equipment or the real need to remove this section here, you can potentially just glue the part on and call it a day. And to do the procedure, I'm going to utilize the Dremel here with a high-speed removal bit. These are found just about every single hardware store. And if you have a set of these and you notice that they're not as efficient as before, that's probably because the pieces are dull and you should, at that point, pick up another set. The trick with removing this type of material over here is that you have to have as much stem as possible on the tool itself. The reason why this is relevant is because with the side skirts over here, it's going to be inhibiting to get in here and carefully remove the material in an even manner if you're butting up against the side skirt tin work. So as you can see here, I basically have just enough of the spindle grabbing onto the collet over here, make sure it's nice and tight, and then from here I could go ahead and actually start the removal process without the portion over here bumping into the tin work. Okay, the Dremel really does some short work of that as well. And from here you can go ahead and use a needle file or some sandpaper just to polish it down and making sure that the surface here is as flat and as flush as possible. And once the section is cleaned off, this is what the final outcome will look like. So at this point here, I could go ahead and take the 3D printed component, snip it off of the sprue, and install it to the appropriate location. On the piece itself, you'll see that it is not symmetrical, where there's more material on the top than on the bottom, and this is as per the design. This here is the top portion, and this here is the bottom portion. So you just line it up, and then once it gets glued in place, you will have the appropriate detailing of the fire extinguisher that's exposed to the viewer. And you can already see how much more detailing and depth it gives the model compared to the original kit supply counterpart. And here's the component now fully super glued in place, and as I touched upon before, you really get a good idea on the depth and detail fidelity found in this part compared to the stock original. As for gluing it in, well, you just super glue it directly to the side. After the insertion of the fire extinguisher, I'm now going to go ahead and prep the surface over here by deleting the molded in handles. I'm not going to install the handles at this point. That's going to be done once the side skirts are completed, because these details here, they're best added at the very tail end of a procedure like this, just to prevent as many of the snagging type situation as one can possibly happen. So I'm going to use the same tools I touched upon before, the high-speed removal bit. A little tricky to get on camera, but I'm going to use the same techniques that I just mentioned before. Alright, as you can see, the surface was quickly polished off with the Dremel, a X-Acto, or in this case a miniature box cutter, and also a little bit of sandpaper. At this point here, I can now begin the installation of the side skirt sections. And here's this side of the model with all of the side skirt straps now fitted in place. As you can see, it does a really good job with flushing out the side detailing here, and just giving you just a little bit of extra detailing, which would commonly just be overlooked on most of the builds that are out there. For removing off of the sprue, this is actually easily done. However, I do got to mention, one technique you can use is with the clean cut snips. However, when you get to some of the ones on the middle portion there, that becomes a little bit more problematic. And I prefer to actually just use the Dremel with the router bit, where I just remove the column from the outside portion. Because the pieces are printed in this clear material, finding exactly where the columns are and routering them out from the opposite side is actually very easily done. I do have one more side to rig out, so I'm going to show the routering procedure in more focus. Okay, so I quickly went ahead and installed these two strips right here and here. Note, the first strip is not anywhere near the front tin work. This one does not have the fastener strip that is present on the remainder section, so this is something to keep in mind. Also, on this model here, as a quick note, you can see that I went ahead and deleted the molded in square sections and replaced them with a small section of brass square stock. I believe I'm going to actually add these to the actual sets, because that would actually be something that would save a little bit of time. But that's something neither here nor there at the moment. Back to what I was saying before. So here we have side skirt panel here, number 9. So I have here number 9, and you can see it's composing of 2 strips. So we have the long strip, and then there's a small little section right over there. And we can see the section right here. There's the long strip, and there's the little end section that would go right there like so. For removing these parts, I am going to use the Dremel technique. And let's go ahead and show that in better light. So for the long strip, I'm just going to go ahead and touch the bottom here where the column is, and just pops right off. I'll do it again. See, there's the column right there. And once the columns are chewed up from the inside, they just pop right off of the sprue. At this point here, you can use a pair of clean cut snips to remove the remnants, and you can also use a needle file like I am over here to carefully polish down any sort of shards that are left from the column. Just a few swipes is really all that's required. You want to be very careful with this because these strips are frail. However, they do polish down fairly quickly. As soon as that's taken care of, it's then time to go ahead and add a little bit of glue. Then just secure it in place. And there we go. Do the same thing to that little mini piece that I touched upon before. Only this one you could probably just bust it off with your knuckle. Like so. It's a bit risky to do that, admittedly, but, you know, I was able to do it just fine. Just line up the snip. Smaller sections are a little bit trickier to polish down. So you don't want to be too overzealous with the polish work. That's really all that it takes. And for the small one here, a little tweezer would actually be beneficial for the application. Or installation, I should say. Alright, and there you have it. The piece is now installed, and now I'm just going to rinse, wash, and repeat for the remainder of sections. No point getting that on camera. Let's cut across when all this is taken care of. And here's this side of the model now with all of the little straps now in place. Like with the reverse side, it really does a lot to flesh out this side of the model. And also on the top portion here, you can see the other details, namely the little bin lids. They are a left and right hand specific component. The giveaway, or I should say the key piece to watch out for, is that the little stop that is found right over here, this portion should be on the outside while the portion that's connected to the latch itself is on the inside. So if you look at the model, you're going to see the little latch on the, or I should say you're going to see the stop right here, and the latch should be on the inner portion right there. Same is also true for the one on the reverse side. Also, we have that unique bit of detailing that was a fairly large omission done by Heng Long, which is the spigot over here for the bilge, or what I presume is the bilge again. And now you can see what it looks like when fitted to the model. As you can see, it really gives this area quite a bit of extra detailing, which would otherwise not be there. One thing to keep in mind when you're fitting this component in place, you want to test fit it with the turret, because obviously something like this can strike the turret, but with the way it's designed, it should have ample clearance. So here you can see the turret fit in place. So you know what? Let me go ahead and readjust the camera because the tripod here is not doing me any favors. Okay, that's better. Okay, so the turret is in its ring, although it's currently not bolted together yet, but that's irrelevant for this portion of the video. As you can see, I can rotate the turret full 360 degrees and not make contact with the little rubber section, or what would be rubber on the real unit, and it clears it absolutely perfectly. But it still gives it that nice little chunk of detailing, which would otherwise be ignored. As you can see from this video, the addition of these new components is a great way to add that much more realism and detail fidelity to what is otherwise a fairly basic model. All of the components that are mentioned in this video, as well as the remainder of the ECA 1/16 scale detail components, can be found on the eastcoastarmory.com website, and the link is found in the video description below. That takes you directly to the 1/16 scale part page, where all these mentioned parts and others are listed. At the moment, I do have several other components that are in research and development, as well as also in print right now. As soon as those parts come in and get fitted to this example, I will go ahead and post more new product announcement videos until this build here is fully fleshed out. And with that, that wraps up this new product announcement video for the ECA 1/16 scale Heng Long M1 Abrams detail component sets. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being new product announcement videos like this one over here, to the small scale model showcase videos, or my 1/6 scale project update videos that frequently get posted to this channel. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of all the detail components that I announce for the various builds that I'm working on, as well as photographs of the smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com, where these components are listed, along with other components in both 1/16 and 1/6 scale. And with that, I'll catch you all on the next one. See you later.